I'm just thinking about that Zen koan, I think it's a Zen koan anyway, about whether a tree makes any sound in the forest when it falls if there's no ear to hear it. It's a great aphorism, if that's what it is, or a koan, if that's what it is. I mean, to me, what it's about, and this is only my interpretation, is to do with the location of where things like hearing and sense-making and meaning and experience, where those things exist. Do they exist with objects? These things we call objects, in inverted commas, in this thing called the world, in inverted commas, which lives entirely outside of our experiencing of it? Or does it lie entirely within our experience? And what's the relationship between our experience and other people's experience? I suppose if I was going to rephrase that sentence, I would have to replay it in different ways to see if I can try and uncover some kind of sense in it, really. So, you know, does the moon? Doesn't make any sense to say, does the moon exist when no one looks up? Because it's not that kind of a question. I think Baudrillard, or somebody, Einstein, I think, made that kind of a statement, that in some ways the moon doesn't exist if nobody looks at it. But I don't think what's intended by that is that it just kind of magically vanishes. I think it's to do with the idea that in the case of the moon, it doesn't exist as a visualizable object without the act of visualization. And similarly, the tree falling in the forest doesn't exist as a sonic event unless there is some kind of instrumentation for experiencing that sonic event. And that isn't the same as measuring it. That's not the same as putting a tape recorder in the forest and waiting for a tree to impress itself onto the magnetic tape. It's not that. It's to do with experiencing, I guess, or to do with the primacy of experiencing in our attempts to make sense of things, and our attempts to take meaning from things, and our attempts to communicate things. So it makes perfect sense I think it makes perfect sense to say both things. I think it makes perfect sense to say, yes, a tree falls in the forest without an ear to hear it, because embedded within that sentence is the understanding that the forest in which the tree falls is the experienceable forest, and the tree is the experienceable tree. And within that kind of forest and that kind of tree, of course, it makes experienceable sounds. But on the other hand, it also makes sense to say, no, it doesn't make a sound when there is no ear to hear it. Because if we are assuming that forests and trees exist outside of our experience, which I have no doubt they do, then their existence is not one of which is defined by our experience. So terms like sound make no sense really in that unexperienceable world. I'm not sure you really captured what I'm thinking of there. If I was going to paraphrase it in a different way, I would say something like, does this sentence have any meaning if no one hears me say it? Does this sentence have any meaning if no one hears me say it? I don't think it does. I think it's a completely meaningless event if no one hears it. It's probably meaningless even if someone does hear it in any serious sense. But I don't think it. I think it's a Cretan paradox in a sense. Yeah, it's a little Cretan paradox, I guess. If no one's hearing this sentence, then effectively this sentence doesn't exist in any meaningful way. If someone does hear it, then it's like the sound of a falling tree. I think I'm tying myself into epistemological knots here, actually. I'll come back to it later.